Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Blabbit. We have a very, maybe a little bit larger cast than normal. We have our mascot that's ready to talk here in a few moments, but we'll get back to him shortly. For those of you who haven't been here before, my name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working in sales for the better part of the last 20 years, just trying to learn and help teach people how to be better communicators and better listeners so they can be a better influencer. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Glenn. I'm so glad to see that we have an interactive audience.
Exactly. He has a lot on his mind to say.
That's always the key to these podcasts. Great to see everybody here. If it's your second, third, 60th time watching us, perhaps, or your first. It's good to have you here on Blabbit. My name is Paul Geiger. I am a New York City public speaking coach and presentation expert. And I work with individuals to make sure that they have clarity, comfort, and confidence in delivering whatever message it is they want to get across. Lisa, tell everybody all about you.
Yes, my name is Lisa Wozniak. I am the owner of Woz Marketing, and our focus is to help private practice owners enroll more clients in their practice through digital marketing. So many of them, with all of the education that they've had to go through to become practitioners, they received very little in the way of marketing. So it tends to be very overwhelming for them. And the technology in particular tends to elicit a sense of fear in many of them. So we help them break that down into easy, digestible steps so that they can market their practice. And Josh.
Hi, thanks. So my name is Josh Beecraft. I run a digital agency and have interest in other agencies as well, which has given me a broad perspective on doing marketing for many different types of businesses, from the local business, such as water damage or mold removal, all the way to big e-commerce stores that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year and everywhere in between. So on top of that, I'm also a marketing coach in a couple different marketing communities, mostly focused on search engine optimization, but can offer a pretty broad perspective. I've been doing this since 2008. I was a hobbyist for a number of years. And 2013, I broke out 100% on my own and haven't looked back. So that's me. Hi, guys.
Hello. So we have Josh making music, and we have the wonderful and powerful Woz. Yes, that's a Big Bang reference to when they saw Steve Wozniak in the restaurant in the Cheesecake Factory. Mm-hmm. So guys, I would like to know kind of your perception right now in 2021 of what's going on in marketing, kind of quick, and what are the biggest misperceptions on what's going on in marketing? You want to start us off, Woz?
Sure. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions with marketing, I think, is that it's a one and done kind of thing. And marketing tends to be a bit more of a long game. I've had practitioners come to me before saying, I can make it another few weeks and I'm going to have to close my doors. What can you do to help me? And nothing. It's a long game. You really have to put in the time and the effort for that. And as far as marketing in 2021, I guess I could sum it up best by saying I think that things are changing. I mean, almost daily, weekly, things are changing. New platforms are coming out that are competing with one another to get your attention. And it's just, would you agree with that, Josh? I think that things are just moving really quickly in marketing in 2021.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty big moving target. There's a lot of businesses that have had a good, stable base for many years on certain platforms, and certain things change on those platforms. And now, I know personally, I've actually I've lost a couple of clients that just no longer had the stamina for longer marketing things because they're high profit, high return advertising, like Facebook in the iOS 14 update. Like, they went from having 5-6x return on investment and scaling profitably to maybe getting 1.25 return, and they just couldn't afford to sustain the business at those kind of returns and scaled back. So that's definitely been a really big thing. I think one of the misconceptions, I agree 100% with what you said. One of the other misconceptions is that we need to be online because everybody else is. And I'll tell you where that misconception leads people astray is that not everybody's offer is actually that good, right? So like, I'm just going to go be online doesn't actually equate to marketing. And that's a big misconception that people have. Like, you've got to have an offer that works, and you got to be able to cut through that noise. People just assume, well, if I hop in the game here, I'm going to be in the pool. And if you don't really know how to diversify yourself and leverage real marketing principles, you're going to move backwards in business rather than forward in most cases. So I think that's a pretty big one.
Kind of like a, if you build it, they will come kind of approach.
Right.
So are both of you guys saying that recently or very quickly and often that the various algorithms that they use to maximize these platforms changes? Is that what you mean by marketing? Like when, Josh, you were talking about getting a big return and then diminished returns. Is it because of those algorithms that keep adjusting?
Yeah. So one of the things that is really important, and you definitely hit on this, Woz, but the thing I talk to a lot about, I just got done with a client meeting talking about this, is marketing stamina. And some people build their marketing stamina on a platform, and they go, great, this is reliable, it's a stable base, it's a foundation, but they don't control the platform. So Facebook's a perfect example of this. Yeah. Nobody controls Facebook except for Facebook. You build your base there, you get your marketing message to work, you get your conversions up, you've got good click-throughs, everything's working, and then one thing changes on Facebook, whether Facebook makes that change, or in this case, the big one that was this year was Apple updated to iOS 14 and it allowed people to opt in to seeing advertisements, which means most people didn't. So iPhones across the board stopped getting a lot of the ads that they were getting before. I think the last study I read on it was like 10% of people opted in to see those ads. So it was a massive decrease when you think of how many iPhones are out there. Millions and millions of people no longer seeing your ads.
Yep.
So you've got to rebuild, your foundation just broke. You got to rebuild your house. You got to lift that thing up, rebuild a foundation, and find another way. And so many people leaned into that one avenue and said, this is our profit monster. And they didn't focus on marketing and all the other ways they could. And they were left holding the bag when those changes happened. It was completely out of their control.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of times you have changes that, again, when we're using other people's platforms, unfortunately, they don't listen to us all the time. Or you have to do a little bit more to get beyond them. As Josh is familiar with, we had a customer that wanted to do an email program, set everything up, purchased a list, went to the provider that I've used for years. They said, this violates our terms and conditions. And so I gave it a week and I sent an email back and said, this doesn't seem like it relates to that. Can you explain this a little bit more? This is what they're doing. Oh, that was an automated thing. You're okay. So sometimes it's not giving up at the first moment. So I think more and more from what you guys are saying, it's the old adage, I can catch more fish with 7 hooks in the water than I can with one. It's going to become more important to diversify and have multiple streams of revenues for your clients. How do you guys see that now and moving forward?
I would agree with that. I think if you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, you're relying on what kind of changes that Josh was talking about, whether that be through Apple, whether that be through Facebook's stuff, whether that be through algorithm changes. So I absolutely would agree with diversifying over many different social media platforms.
Yeah, and I think even beyond that, right? If you go back to like foundational teachings like Dan Kennedy and magnetic marketing and stuff, like you're breaking that barrier of offline, online constantly in very specific ways. And you could actually, like, this is weird to talk about on a platform where we're digital and we're so used to doing everything digital. There's businesses today that are barely on the internet that do millions and millions and millions of dollars using old forms of marketing that we forget about all the time, but they understand communication. Like you know this better than anybody, Paul. Like when you get your messaging right and you're able to communicate that properly to the right audience, it doesn't matter where that audience is. If they're on the internet's just a media to be able to run ads on, right? Just like TV is, just like radio is and anything else. But we tend to think of like the internet's the place to do it. And it's just ultimately not true.
Well, may I real quick? I mean, I think a great example of that was last year. More people were at home. There's been less junk mail going out. I advised a lot of people to get back into doing, every door direct mail and doing stuff around their locations, especially for restaurants and things like this, because sometimes what's old becomes new again.
Yeah. And these social media platforms, do you think that the newest and the latest and greatest is simply a shiny object? I mean, what about things like you talk about diversifying? What about email marketing, which seemed like it was, like Glenn was saying, kind of old school, but there is definitely a place for that because that is a platform that you possess. That's your platform that you've created, your lead list or your email list. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
I think that email marketing is a great way of utilizing your marketing message because you don't have to rely on an algorithm. You don't have to, 100% of the people on your email list are going to receive your message. You don't have to rely on what percentage Facebook says that they'll allow, or LinkedIn, or any other platform for that matter. And, while people may think that email is old school, we're still all checking our emails every single day, aren't we?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I agree with it completely. And it's funny because you can, marketers do this all the time, right? We can leverage statistical data and we can say, well, email open rates are going down and going down and going down. But we also have more emails going out than ever before, and more coming into our inboxes than ever before. So like you lean back into those tried and true marketing practices and then work on, like you just said, the platform you own. That's a winning combination almost every time.
Well, and I think it's more importantly when you come to those is doing what we all do and what we all preach about testing. Because I know personally I used 5 different platforms last week, and it was very interesting on bounce rates. It was very interesting on open rates and things like this. So it is a big difference from platforms. And if you're not testing out different things, how do we know what's working versus, the one horse cowboy that comes out and says, this is what you need to do, Mr. Customer, because of blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? If we're just sending out emails and not doing anything on Facebook, we're missing out on people. If we're just doing Facebook and not doing LinkedIn, we're missing out on people. So how many people do you guys really see that are out there offering customers services to help them expand their businesses that truly know what's going on, or they just were told something by a guru and now they're regurgitating that information?
Yeah, it probably happens more than we'd like to admit, huh? People want to tend to go with the flow, and just kind of to piggyback off of what you were saying, Glenn, testing all those different platforms, and it's a great opportunity for you to clarify your marketing message, to find out what's working and what isn't, because that's a huge part of it, isn't it? I mean, you've got to make sure that your messaging is cutting all the way through all of that noise and getting directly to your target audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this goes back to like one of the misconceptions as well. And one of the things that's happened is marketing has been, the definition of it has changed in people's minds, not necessarily from its origin, but in people's minds it has. And people think it's a tactic. They don't think it's an actual, like a well thought out campaign that is proactive and reactive and dynamic across many different mediums and all of that. They think it's just search engine optimization, or it's just running a Facebook ad. Like, oh yeah, we'll solve this. We'll just run a Facebook ad.
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe, right? Like that's definitely one good thing to do, but could we do 5 or 6 other things at the same time and actually solve the problem? Because like you just alluded to, Lisa, once that's determined, once you actually can connect with your market and you've got multiple mediums to do it, like everybody that we know that's got something really great going on in their marketing, that's exactly what they've done. That's the whole secret. Like the right message to market match across the right mediums. That is marketing at its core. There's an artistic side of applying all of that for sure, but it's got nothing to do with a tactic. It's got everything to do with an idea and a concept and an application of it.
So you're saying, I'm sorry, Paul, you're saying successful marketers take the Edison approach. They don't fail 100 times. They figure out 100 ways not to do it before they figure out the right way.
There
you got
go.
that right.
So let me ask you guys, as all of you, because you guys are all in marketing heavily, coaching, helping people out. What do you find you have to help people the most with? To dovetail on what you just said, Josh, is it the tactics or is it the strategy? What do most people get right away, but then maybe need more help with? I understand one is a lot bigger, but one is also more technical. So which do you find is the more necessary coaching, or is it in an order?
Yeah, I'll tell you that, like, what's coming to mind as you're asking that is actually a number of things. And one of them is interesting in that many of the businesses that we help actually have done fine without engaging marketing services to begin with. So part of, like, they've got like a local business, for example, like a local restaurant. They've just done the normal shoot from the hip stuff, and people came because they had good food, and then, you know, word of mouth, and like, oh, let me take you there for your birthday. Like, that kind of stuff still works, obviously. So one of the challenges is actually, if I do this marketing and it works, I'm afraid I get too busy, right? So, like, on one hand, that's like, I'm afraid I do too much business. And it's like, okay, well, there's definitely, like, right now, of course, with staffing problems and whatnot, there's concerns there, but also, like, that's the great problem to have to solve. But the other side is getting somebody off of the track of their own ideas, because they're competent business owners, but they're not necessarily competent marketers. They're the perfect person to run their business. They're amazing to run their business. They're not the perfect person to market their business, even if they're the right person to sell the stuff. And bridging that gap and getting past people that are, you know, business owners in general, like, they take risks, they go out, they're A-type personalities, and they believe in themselves, and that's fantastic. That's everything that makes them awesome. But it's also what works against a lot of people in their marketing, because they make decisions that they're just simply not educated about. So it's getting them to listen to the fact that you're the expert and take that advice and say, give me the opportunity to show you this is going to work. And a lot of times you're up against, that's a pretty big uphill battle.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, it's the idea that, you know, their mother, brother, sister, cousin told them that this is the way to do it, and they've got this, you know, tunnel vision that this is the only way that it can happen. And you have to kind of come in the back door with it and show them the strategy behind the decisions that you're making with your marketing.
Yeah, a lot of what I do is education for selling. It's a lot of education and selling. Yeah.
And I think the only other thing that I would add to that is just the once bitten, twice shy. You have a lot of people out there that have been burnt by other companies. So why should they trust you? Why is what you're doing differently? And why do you care about them where other people have just cared about the money they were receiving?
Yeah. You know, Josh, when you were describing the restaurant owner, it reminded me of that great Yogi Berra quote: "Nobody goes to that restaurant anymore. It's too crowded."
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah.
Yogiisms.
Yes.
So let me ask you a really broad question, and man, this is going to be some room for discussion. With everything, it can be overwhelming to see how many options there are in terms of marketing. I realize that there are, you know, the basic ones that you need to use. Is it possible to market too much? Is it possible to oversaturate or just be a nuisance or an annoyance rather than someone who cuts through the fog?
So my perspective on this tends to be more extreme, because the hesitation that comes up in even asking the question, right, is that we all know that person that is like scared of risking the relationship with their customer, or they've been beat over the head with marketing. They're like, I'm done with this. I don't want to see it anymore. But here's my take on this. It's a little extreme, and it usually does. I usually cannot sell my clients on this, even though I think it's what's best for them. Best known beats best every time, right? And to be best known, you've got to be loud. You've got to be over the top. You got to connect properly, but you've got to be like the guy, the auto repair guy that does stuff in his garage might be the best auto repair guy in the world, right? Like, outstanding, but if nobody knows about him, it doesn't matter. You could have a mediocre guy that's got a big shop and he's super loud in the marketplace. You see the ads everywhere. They're constantly changing, all of that. Everybody knows it. So they go there and they just go, great, they offered me a good deal. And I think as long as your offer is not problematic in the sense that it's like, you're not beating people over the head with $5,000 oil changes, right? Like that's instantly ridiculous, right? I think you can be as loud and aggressive as you want to be because it'll always pay off. You might get some people mad, like, oh, I can't stand these ads anymore. But you're going to catch a whole bunch of people and you're going to be a bigger business than anybody else if you're the loudest in a marketplace.
Yeah, one of the things that I tell my clients when they're concerned about that question is, not everybody is seeing, let's just use social media as an example. Not everybody is seeing your posts. You could be putting it out all the time and it feels to you like it's really obnoxious, but you got to take the algorithm into consideration as well. Not everybody is seeing it. You may be putting it out there all the time, but not everybody is seeing it. And I think the other part of it is it kind of depends, to me anyway, on what the marketing tool is you're using at the moment. So like if you're sending 5 emails out a day about the same thing to your list, that's going to get old for them pretty quick and you're going to see people unsubscribe from you. So I think that it also depends on the marketing tool you're using at the time.
Well, and sometimes don't you agree that we have to share with business owners and understand the buying cycle? Because if it's something that's $20 for an oil change or 40, you can be a little bit more aggressive and a little more direct with it. If it's someone that says, buddy of mine owns a hearing aid facility, that your average buying cycle for someone to get a hearing aid is 5 years. Well, you better be using a lot more of a concerned coaching informational thing for that person to keep them engaged, because it's going to take a lot longer for them to get the message to sink in. So it kind of depends on your buying cycle and the price of your product, because the larger the price, the larger the buying cycle.
Right. It's about creating that lasting memory of who you are. They may not be prepared to buy at the moment, but if they see you often enough and they hear your marketing message often enough, you're the first person that they're going to think of when it's time for them to make that purchasing decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
There's interesting dynamics with that as well. If you are an aggressive marketer that way, and I'll tell you who's really, really good at this, whether you love him or hate him, is Grant Cardone. Grant he'll send 5-6 emails a day, and his attitude is, if you don't respond to the email and you don't buy, then you're not the person that needs to be on the list anyways. And when you're ready, you're going to see my other marketing because I'm so aggressive, and you'll be back on it before too long. So when you have data on your side and you've got that thing, and you're like, best known beats best every time. So if you're constantly always the best known, you might get some of those people that are like, no, I'm not going to do business because that guy's abrasive. But you're going to get a whole bunch of people that are like, hey, sending me 5 emails a day, but like, I can't, like, yeah, this is perfect. Like, I'll deal with those because the other value propositions, you'll do these trade-offs, and it's not always about making people happy. It's about making sales happen. And those are two very different things, right? So when we're being aggressive to get sales, that's because money needs to come through the door for a business to survive. That's the function of business, is to collect money while serving somebody, right? And if you have that belief, and this is one of the beliefs that I think a lot of business owners really struggle with, is that selling is serving. If you really have that belief that selling is serving, Russell Brunson talks about this. If selling is serving, then you have a moral obligation to sell as hard as you possibly can to get people into the products and services that you know are going to help them. So why not be loud and over the top about it? That's why you see some of those marketers push so hard. They get pushback, but they also have a community that is loyal, and they've served at a level that nobody else has, and it's because of that aggressiveness.
Well, and I love it's your message. I mean, if you follow Dan Kennedy, as long as you're giving away more information, you give away 3 before you ask for 1. As long as you're still giving that information away for free, it's going to be easier to get over that annoyance, because I'm learning from you. I'm gaining something from you every time you communicate with me. So as long as you focus on the WIFM for the recipient, I think it's a lot easier to be more aggressive.
Now, we hear this term quite a bit from marketing gurus, from all over the internet, and that is this phrase: establish your authority within that space. Now, I understand that can be very much like a double-edged sword, because you could think that by establishing your authority, you don't want to jeopardize your reputation by selling. But what are some of the steps? What are some of the practical steps that our viewers can use to really begin that process of establishing their authority so that they become a go-to person that people will pay attention to when their marketing really begins to ramp up scale and start in earnest?
I think that one of the best ways to begin doing that is based off of what Glenn was just saying. If you're adding value to your audience and you're helping them to solve whatever problem they're facing, and your product or service helps to solve that problem, going out and creating posts and blogs and videos on just that is a great way to be able to establish that authority. I mean, you're demonstrating that you know how to solve the problem of your target market. Would you agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, 100%. That's a fantastic way to do it. It's this topic is actually something I'm semi-passionate about because I use it in my sales philosophy. One of the metrics is undeniable authority or unquestionable authority, and for me it's based on educating in a valuable way. So if that's a free lead magnet, if it's that sort of thing, but also just in your conversations, right? When you're talking to somebody, you can't assume that somebody knows what SEO does and what it's going to do. I educate just like I teach my students about SEO. Like I don't get into the super technical nitty gritty, but like, here's how we need to think about this. This is why we build these things. And people like, oh, I get it. And when you expand somebody's mind and you empower them with knowledge, right? Which is what you're doing when you actually fill in the gaps for somebody, they feel more confident and empowered in their own ability to understand a concept. Then you have authority in their mind because you've genuinely helped them, whether they were asking for it or not, right? So like when there's another piece of that too. Like when you're on the stage or you're on the cover of the book, or like right now we're all on this podcast, like just by the very nature of the way humans work, right? There's an implied authority as well. So we can sit here and just have a conversation amongst ourselves that people can listen into. And there's this authority. And the same thing would happen if we just held up a book and our face was on the book, right? There's actually, I won't go too far into it, but there's a book called Sway that talks a little bit about this. And there's a violinist that was world-class and sells out the biggest arenas. And he would go just put on a baseball cap and a old t-shirt that was a little stretched out and go play down in New York or DC, and nobody cared, right? Like he was one of the best ever. Nobody, like he made like $100 in tips that day. But he'd go sell out one of the biggest concert halls in the world when he puts on the suit and he's in that place. So environment matters for that authority piece. And then connecting the dots for people, I think, is the other piece.
Well, and I think the one thing that really helps you, even if you don't have a lot of that out there, when you're in the meeting with the client, when you're doing it, is to be the trusted advisor, to be the consultant, and maybe to not be the salesperson. Yeah. We've all seen too many times when people have a sales pitch they're trying to get out there, versus taking the time, like I talked about in the intro, to ask questions, to learn about your business, to listen to your customer, and then provide solutions, or maybe tell them that you're not the right solution for them. So when we talk about salespeople versus consultants, I'd like if you guys could both kind of expand on that, because I'm sure we've all seen times in the past when people just have a sales pitch they want to get across. And you know what? If I'm sitting here talking and not paying attention, tell you how much I think guitars are stupid or whatever, I'm probably going to shut Josh off. So what's your guys' opinions about consultants versus salespeople?
I think that when you're consulting, and this kind of goes back to the establishing authority piece that we just covered. When you're helping somebody solve a problem and you're consulting them and you're guiding them down the path on how to get this problem solved, if you're doing that in an online space, a lot of times what we'll see is people begin to think, my gosh, if they're giving away this much value for free on a daily basis, what am I going to get when I sign up to work with them? It's going to be huge. So consulting done well takes care of the sales piece, I think.
Yeah, it's an automatic move, in my opinion. That's where that undeniable authority thing, that it's just my language for it. That's what it is you're in my mind, if you consult the right way, you become the unquestionable authority in the room. on the subject, therefore the automatic solution to their problem. And you don't have to sell anything. Like an example of this, I'm in a BNI group, and I had my 10-minute thing yesterday. And all I did was come up and said, look, you guys know me as the digital marketing guy, but like, what does that really mean? Can any of you tell me? Well, like, you do some SEO or this, that. I said, no, I produce these results, and I showed the results that I produce for clients and the ROI and these other things, and their eyes lit up. And I didn't sell them on anything. I just literally said, hey, this is what real marketing that's figured out, that produces results, looks like. And I didn't even say there's a path for you to do it. And it's funny, I even called out the financial investment guy. I said, do you get returns like this for your clients? Like, not to call you out and say anything, but like, I can produce 10, 20x returns with good marketing consistently. And that was it. Like, I just educated them on my process and what I do. I've been in that room for months. After that one piece of consulting a room like that, I had half the room coming up and talking to me like, maybe we should have a conversation about this, that, or the other thing, without asking anybody. Right. So that authority, if you do it right in a consultative manner and just help people, again, connect those dots, it's just obvious that you're the one to talk to, and you don't have to work at all to go, hey, listen, let me bend your ear for a minute. You know, can I ask you a question? No, like, you come, I'd rather you come ask me a question. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Education is the strongest sales tool, you know?
So, to expand on that, I have a question for you three, because the analogy that comes from that, Josh, is when I was in a different group like BNI, and I said what I did there for 3 years, and I finally had a CPA that said, hey, I need something. Can you come over and talk to me? And I made the comment about it to him. Does he want something that's just a brochure? Does he want a salesperson that's making money for him? He goes, I want that salesperson object. So word pictures, painting word pictures. You know, if you guys can all kind of share the importance to people that are listening to this on painting a word picture and putting it in the message into a way that your consumer understands it instead of your vernacular from being on the inside.
Yeah. I think really what it comes down to, and this is a point you've brought up many times, Glenn, is know what the need is. Know what we hear this word a lot, the pain points, but it's what is the need? What is the need of that particular audience? And then speak in terms of benefits, not in terms of mechanism, but talk in terms of benefits. Even, you don't have to talk about how many steps the program is or how good you are. It's just, and this goes back to what Josh said, social proof. I did this for them, because there's that famous quote again, people will believe very little of what you say, some of what other people, tell them, and mostly what they tell themselves. So you give them that, you work on the benefits, and I love what you said, Glenn, speak their language.
Yeah, I think that painting a word picture can be really powerful, especially, Paul, you were talking about people's pain points, and if you utilize the right word, you can elicit the emotions that they're feeling that are associated with those pain points. Like my sales aren't where they need to be. It makes me feel like a loser. It makes me feel like I can't support my family. It makes me feel, right? So if you craft a marketing message that can tap into those emotions, and then with the benefits you talked about, Paul, say, I can help you out of that. You don't have to feel like a loser. You don't have to feel like you're not supporting your family. We've helped people with this approach, and we'll help you get there too, because they want away from the pain point. Obviously, we all do, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things definitely that come to mind with this, but one of the things that I do a lot of is metaphors, and I try to use metaphors to paint those pictures and communicate with things they're already familiar with. So if I'm talking to, like this morning, I was talking to a machine shop, and I shifted the metaphors to their language, right? Like if we're going to start PPC marketing, there's going to be a bit of learning and adjustment, similar to when you guys are milling out a block of steel. There's a certain amount of waste that has to be produced in order to get the functional piece that you're working on, right? And like speaking in their language in terms of what they're used to understanding, they can apply a concept to what it is that I'm saying and instantly understand it versus me trying to explain it in nuanced detail. Well, you see, some people are going to click this ad and they're not actually going to be viable. And like down that road, I can just say, hey, there's some adjustments to be made, just like what you guys do in your business this way. And I often use a racing analogy as well for things like, do you want a website for the sake of a website, or do you want a website that performs? Because if we were to race in an actual race, the first thing we would need is not a car, we need a race car. So we need to build a race car out of your website, not just we don't need a Honda Civic. We need, this, and, carries that through winning the race, winning the championship, so on and so forth. But I think one of the big things that you just hit on, Paul, is really understanding that need. And there's a really cool sort of example that you can use to detail this, which is if somebody's looking for a 1/4-inch drill bit, what do they actually want? A drill bit or a 1/4-inch hole, right? Well, they want a 1/4-inch hole. But even more than that, what do they want a 1/4-inch hole for? Well, they want to hang a picture, right? Well, great. Well, what's that picture? What do they really want? They want to be able to see what that picture means to them every time they walk in the room and have that be part of their environment and space. So we're not just drilling holes, we're creating a place for you to enjoy and spend your time in, right? And really understanding what that means in depth is a really important part of it. So I love that you brought that up.
Good point.
Well, and a lot of times, when we're saying things, we don't realize how much power our words have until afterwards. Back in my old days, the phone book, and I tried to tell reps, don't talk about all this different lingo with the size of a page. You know what, Mr. Customer, I have some customers that start out with a Post-it. When they can do it, then they get to the business card. Where they really start seeing returns is when they go to the $100 bill ad. Not the dollar bill ad, the $100 bill ad. Why do you call it that? Well, that's where we really start seeing returns increase and stuff like that. And you wouldn't believe when you see somebody once a year, when you come back in, they're like, you know what? I'm ready for that $100 bill ad, Glenn. How much is it going to be this year? So when you can put things, again, in a way they can understand, and it's something that they're going to remember, they do recall these things. And then again, you're kind of helping them make their own decisions for them.
Know your audience, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so we're having a fun year in 2021. We had a year in 2020. What do you guys think we're going to be doing? Because as we've kind of alluded to in the beginning, there's maybe a plethora of people coming out saying we're the neatest thing since ice cream. Guess what? We can do all these things on our platform that you're going to pay for all these other things or whatever. And I see a lot of confusion by business owners, without naming some of the names of the ones that have come up over the last year or two. Hey, I'm going to go over here because they do all these things. I'm like, okay, well, let's kind of break it down. Have you used it? If they do 10 things, odds are they do 2 good. They do another 2 or 3 that are okay. And the rest of them, they're throwing in there to say they're the next Butterbrickle ice cream instead of just vanilla. So as we move into 2022, what advice would you have for business owners as far as understanding that they're not going to get everything from one place, but they may be able to get everything from one consultant that knows the best pieces to put together to make the cake?
Josh, you want to take a stab at that one?
That's an interesting question, because there's a few dynamics. I'm just sort of reacting to these with what comes to mind when you're asking the question. And one of the things that's really this is almost counterintuitive to say, but you're far better off to trust a marketing consultant that wants to work with you and earn your business than you are to trust the marketing of a company that wants to sell you something. And I know that's like it's like anti-marketing at the same time pro-marketing, right? Like there's a nuance there. But it goes back to the old saying, right? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? Automations are beautiful things when they actually replace real processes that needed to be replaced. But if the process didn't need to replace, automation for the sake of automation is pure insanity, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think when you're looking at software solutions that promise, rankings, which implies that you're going to get more business and implies, you have to look at what the implication is of the marketing. Like, if I come in and say I get you more rankings, you don't want more rankings. It goes back to what we just said, that knowing the need some people are really confused about what they need. So for business owners, I'd say be real clear on what it is that you need before you make a decision on that. Do you need more rankings? No, you want more customers. Rankings are a vehicle for that, but now you have to determine whether this thing that you're looking at is the correct vehicle to get you there or not. Because if it was easy as just buy this thing for $100 or $500 or whatever, why wouldn't we all do it? There wouldn't even be a need for an entire marketing industry if this revolutionary piece of whatever widget was gonna make it happen. And I think a lot of business owners are keen to that, but I think a lot of them are similar to what you said earlier, Lisa. Like you get people that are like, I'm only a couple months away from closing the doors here. I need to do something. It's got to be inexpensive and it's got to work. And they're just hoping, and they'll spend that few $100s on faith. 2 months later, when nothing happened, they're like, oh, now I'm 2 months closer and I burned this money, and that sort of thing. So it's a hard question to like nail down the right answer to, because it comes to a level of the business owner has to know what they want with clarity, and that's not always the case when it comes to their marketing, because they're not marketing people.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You can either do it cheap, fast, or good. Pick two out of three. I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
And I just wanted to piggyback off of what Josh had said, the importance of if you have to choose between the two, a marketing agency or a consultant, I would hands down go with the consultant, because you need to gain some clarity on what it is you want to achieve and the best way to go and do that. Whereas some traditional agencies just want to sell you ad space or social media packages or whatever the case may be. That may not be in your best interest. So hands down, I would go with the consulting approach. And I think that would be true in 2021 or 2022.
Should we let
them know? Because there's always going to be bright new shiny objects in front of your face anyway, right?
Should we let them on the secret? Marketing companies typically don't train their people as well, because if they do, they become a marketing consultant.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic there, because we deal with, I was just explaining this to a client the other day, like we deal with a lot of our clients come from people that have been burned by those other companies because they were given these really beautiful reports and they showed, hey, we did these blog posts and we got these social signals and we X'd these little boxes and it all meant something apparently, but it never accumulated to ROI. And one of my challenges is actually like, hey, I can do stuff for you just for the sake of doing stuff, or I can do what's effective. And some business owners, this is a mindset shift. This comes back to answering this question again. They want to know the activity that you're doing to produce the result as a way to quantify your value. And I'll tell you, with a marketing consultant, that's the wrong approach almost always. Not that they shouldn't be transparent. I'm transparent with everything that I do. But when you have that mindset, what you're looking for is the problem and the reason to not spend the money versus the ROI and the reason to spend the money. And when you're looking to not lose versus win, those two mindsets are very different. And if you do any investment in the stock market, any investment in crypto, any investments wherever, you're never going to see the return on an investment that you will on a good marketing campaign that has been figured out and gone through the paces. It's the best investment you can make, period. And to risk that and trivialize it based on trying to decide whether or not the activities that somebody's doing is right when the bank account is increasing is a massive mistake on a business owner's part. A consultant is not your employee, and it's not your job to make sure they sweep the floors when there's nothing else going on. It's your job to communicate properly with them and give them feedback on what their efforts are doing so they can adjust accordingly to make sure that those efforts are valuable for you. And it's got to be a two-way partnership, not a, hey, I'm paying you to do something. It's, hey, I'm paying you to work with me on this, not for me on this. And when you have that,
big amen.
It's a beautiful, beautiful situation.
At what point do you find that, or have you ever experienced where you believe that something was working well or that something would work well, but the client wanted to pivot or shift or tweak more to get a better ROI or get a faster ROI? Have you ever had an experience like that you can share with us?
I got a customer in the 60-day suspension for link over link velocity. Those things are 63 days actually. Those things are legit. And after that, I never let a client pressure me into doing stuff. We're going to do it my way. If you don't like it, there's someone else to help you.
Explain that for anybody who might not be familiar, Glenn.
When you're having links coming to a URL, a page you're trying to rank, there's a velocity mechanism. So if you're trying to do too much to something that doesn't have enough links coming to it, there's a 7 and a 63-day penalty with Google. We did enough to get the 63-day penalty. So for 63 days, the customer went from being on bottom page 1, top of page 2 to not being on 10 pages. 64th day, we came back in. So Google spanked me on the bottom a little bit and said, don't do that again, young man.
Yeah, for me, I don't know that I have as specific of thing like that, because it's been long enough that like when my process is usually I'm establishing enough authority that people ask me, not to say that sometimes they're not like, hey, let's do this, but where I see this really break down in this context is that people don't understand how to create their offers. And they're so connected to their business that they don't want to explore an adjustment of the offer. So they want more business, but they want to put roadblocks in front of you to get them that business when you're going, hey, if we position it like this, like, let's just try it. I'm not saying you change your entire business forever this way, but they're like, no, this isn't how we want to do it. There's too much risk here. There's too much this there or that there. And it's like, well, if you're not even going to try it, you're just basing that on assumption, not opinion. And that's where I see them double down into the other way, where it's like, you're hindering my ability to help you based on being unwilling to even attempt to try my advice. And it's really interesting to see people do that, because it goes back to that business owner thing, right? Like, we're business owners too. And like, I'm not easy to tell what I should do for my business. And why should any business owner be? It's their baby. They built it. They put the time and effort into it. So I'm not judging them for it, but it is a mistake that I think a lot of people make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a difficult hurdle to get over, because it's so passionate for them. This is something that they built from the ground up their own sweat and tears and all that stuff. But I struggle with that sometimes too. Somebody is so, the tunnel vision is so strong that they think that this is the marketing message that has to go out there. And it doesn't cover any of the strategies that we often use when crafting the right marketing message. And when you can't tell them that, you just sort of have to let them know that you aren't going to see the results with this. If this is what you want to do, you're absolutely welcome to do it, but you're not going to see the outcome that you want to see here. And that's the best you can do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, Paul's probably heard me say this 1 or 100 times, is the biggest obstacle we have to deal with other people, whether it be other marketers or other business owners, is that obstacle, which is the 6 inches between their ears. So how many times have you seen marketers, business owners, again, difficult hearing something and you know what, that sounds good, but they're going to think about it, hesitate about it, wait about it before they try and implement it. And I'm talking about this because a friend of a good gentleman that Josh and I know very well, came over to my office about 5 years ago and said, hey, I just paid this person to consult me. And it was an intelligent person that was doing the consulting. And they said they should try this mechanism. I thought, that's kind of cool. So when he left, I implemented it. And I called him about 3 or 4 days later and said, hey, that works pretty good. Yeah, go ahead. I think that's a great idea. And he's like, wait, you've already done it? I'm like, well, yeah, it sounded interesting. I want to know if it worked. How do I know if it works if I don't try it? So how much do you see business owners and or marketers, again, getting in their own way and not using their own results to see what works and overanalyzing and maybe having paralysis by analysis?
Yeah, I think for me, that comes in to people being too eager for results too quickly. It's a patience problem. So I've had people that have they wanted to shift budget away from a long-term investment like SEO because it's not paying off immediately, but all the math says it'll pay off, tenfold and work for them for the next decade in every single way, shape, or form to throw up a billboard that doesn't have any targeted anything. And they'll pay $1,000 a month for that because they can see it, right? Versus this other intangible that they're paying all this money for and they don't see, which totally understand the paradigm in their head. Like, why am I doing this? But it's mathematically a very poor decision and often leads to aunts, uncles, friends, and family saying, oh, I love the new billboard. And they get all this validation for it. but not a single customer is like, oh, you got a billboard up? Oh, I didn't notice, right? Like it's that mistake is made, I think, too often out of a reaction to need their marketing money to pay off immediately. And these are the same people, by the way, that put money into a 401k for 60 some years before seeing any benefit for it. But when it comes to the business, there's just a weird glitch there. So,
yeah, they want it in 30 days when it comes to that, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that analysis by paralysis or whatever that saying is real. I mean, it can, when you're looking, when you've built a business and you want to take it to the next level, or you're struggling, you really want that money to work on your behalf. And so it can be kind of scary. And if you've got, sometimes family and friends are the worst thing for somebody's marketing, because they're going to tell you what they want to hear. Oh my God, that's the best message I ever heard. Where did you find that graphic? It's fantastic. And so you operate in a space that isn't really real, and that can certainly work against you. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a little bit of that, though, that goes into sharing that content. I mean, you have to be prepared for a little bit of that response or that reaction where people are going to say, wow, that was really great. Thanks. That was great. Just like Josh's analogy, it's a billboard. Basically, I put up this really valuable video, but that's part of the long game strategy. So what is that?
It's playtime. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You have a guest in your studio.
Yes, and he runs the house. Well, and this is probably our last question. We have to wrap up a little bit, but again, with what you guys were talking about with doing some things, it's hard sometimes to get some business owners or us to understand there's a reason why big businesses do focus groups, because they could be huge. An example of this, back in my own phone book days, I had a phone book ad that wasn't running very well. And we lived in a community of 30 somethings that all had young families. And so I brought the book out one night when we were curing the world's problems and said, what do you think about this? And one woman said, well, it looks kind of snooty. In our neighborhood, we drive Ford Explorers and Hondas. This has a Cadillac and a Lexus in there. I think they're just snobby. Literally, by changing the picture the next year to a Ford Explorer and a Honda, our calls went up 20%. So again, helping your customer maybe get out of their own way and understand the message to deliver to their customer. So back to messaging, how much is it sometimes we have to help people get out of their own way so that we can deliver something that's going to drive results and personify the image that their customers want, maybe more than the image that they want to personify.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of that goes back to the education that we've been talking about during this past hour. It's a matter of educating them on the strategy behind the decisions that we make. It takes research. It takes knowing with clarity who your target market is and what their pain points are, and how you have to shift away from what you've done before to something different. I think Josh had said earlier that if they could have, they would have fixed it themselves already. They need to get out of their own way and understand that they don't know how to solve the problem. So they've got to bring in somebody who can look at it objectively and help them create a strategy that will move them forward.
Yeah, this maybe doesn't directly connect, but this came to mind as the conversation was progressing. One of my favorite quotes is from Seth Godin, and it's actually a signature in my email. It says, the cost of doing nothing is greater than the cost of being wrong. And it's important to be willing to spend money to be wrong, because that helps tell you where you're right. And if you're not willing to analyze that data and you're not willing to be wrong enough times to find right, your competitor will always, the person who's willing to do that. I mean, it goes back to Dan Kennedy again, right? The person who can spend the most amount of money to acquire a customer wins every single time. That means you can afford to be wrong more than everybody else and win, because your business is built in a way that's going to serve them and value them the right way. You're paying attention to offers, you're paying attention to customer lifetime values, you're paying attention to all of those things. And that analysis of those data pieces, it's got to be objective. You can't be emotional about it. It's got to be true. The math is the math. and you either respond to it emotionally or you respond to it in a way that you take specific actions against it to get better. And you know, a lot of people that build a business that gets them into a place where they're in control of their life and they make a decent living and they support some employees. I got nothing against anybody like that, but they're not necessarily looking to grow. Those people, those are the people that we're often up against, where they're like, well, I think I want to get some more business in today, but they're not looking to grow the business. They pay no attention to those things whatsoever. But we all know that one person in the marketplace that's dominating, and they're looking at all of those things very objectively. And that's the shift. That's why they're dominating.
Well, I think the best story I had from that was a guy in Orange County that was doing a plumber that was doing some advertising about 15 years ago. And the rep said, you know, I think if we did a couple things, we could probably reduce your budget down from $25,000 a month to $22,000 a month. And the business owner actually contacted that rep's boss and said, if your employee ever tells me to spend less money again, I'll take it somewhere else. So be careful what advice you're sharing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a great hour, everyone. If we start off with Lisa, if you could tell everybody if they'd like to contact you, what's the easiest way to do that? And then we'll go on to Josh for the same.
Yes, you can reach me through my website, wasmarketing.com.
Cool. So for me, most of my, if you're actually going to reach me at a social level, just my Facebook, friend me on Facebook, private message me on Facebook's the best. If you're looking for any sort of business advice or anything, clicksearchsolutions.com. Is a good place to find me, or again, just message me on Facebook. I maybe don't have as many great. I know some people come on, they're like, "Here's my Facebook, my Instagram." I'm busy. I can't check all of those, so Facebook's fine for me.
Appreciate the honesty, Josh. Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, guys. Really, this was quite enjoyable, quite enlightening, and lots of value there.
Yes, thank you guys
Thank you
very
for
much.
having us.
This is again one of our little twists that we're doing as we're growing. We're only 60, so we're still young. But I think doing some panels like this again gives us a little bit of diversity that we can really bring value to the people that are watching. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right,
everyone. Same time, same places next week. Have a great week, everyone.